People desperately hanging onto planes, running like their lives depend on it because they do. If all the terrible things you see now happened just 2 months ago, would you believe it? 2 months ago, there was a big issue that was the global main interest. It was so shocking, it was hard to believe that it happened now, in the 21st century. It was the Taliban taking control of Afghanistan. Hello, we are the Shinsong Middle School UNESCO Club, and we will be talking about the second worldwide issue, continued from the previous one, the Myanmar coup d'etat. Before we dig in, we'll introduce the main points of the video. The first topic we'll go over is the Taliban in Afghanistan and how they came to regain control over the country. Next, Afghanistan's current situation with all the innate war. Third, other countries' reactions and solutions. And fourth, what side our country is taking. Now, let's get into the first chapter. From a long time ago, Afghanistan was bordering with many other countries and suffered attacks and colonization because it connected Europe and Asia. Then in 1970, Russia invaded Afghanistan. In the process, Mujahideen was made to oppose this invasion. The problem started here. After the war ended, Mujahideen was split into several groups due to internal conflict, and Afghanistan fell in disorder again. The organization that was made in this period is the Taliban. Sure, at first, the Taliban's purpose was to calm the country down, but when they finally gained control of the country in 1996, the worst period of Afghanistan's history began. In 2001, a paramilitary group called Al-Qaeda terrorized the Twin Towers, 9/11, and the US Army invaded Afghanistan upon learning that the Taliban were helping Al-Qaeda hide out. The interference of the US Army felled the Taliban government, but members hiding in the country and the borders kept at war with America, and finally exhausted of all the meaningless fighting, the US withdrew all soldiers. The Taliban immediately regained control, which led to the current situation. Then how is the Taliban regime affecting and will affect the country? To know this, we must know the basics of Taliban control in 1996, 20 years ago. During this time, the Taliban ruled with the Sharia law. Women were required to cover all body parts and be unaccompanied when going out. They could not be educated or employed. The Taliban also used horrific punishments such as cutting off the wrists of a thief. The Taliban are currently ensuring people that they will make up a more progressive government, but many Afghans are afraid and the number of escape attempts are increasing. Thousands have gathered at airports to catch a flight, any flight, and some are hanging onto the sides of leaving planes. People were not picky about their escape routes, and some have died from falling off flying airplanes. The Taliban regime is also causing Afghanistan's economy to fall apart. With the cut of international aid, trade is nearly impossible. This caused prices to rise 10 to 20% and limited the amount of money one could retrieve in a week. On top of that, Afghanistan's GDP prediction for this year is minus 9.7%, practically an economic collapse. How does the international community view this regime? Right now, their biggest worry is that more Islam terrorist groups like the Taliban could be activated. The culprit of the 9/11 terror, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, which used to leave the entirety of Europe shaking in fear, could act up in connection with the Taliban. And the refugee problem is at hand too. Most countries are not opening up to stray Afghans. The EU are donating up to $670 million so the refugees can settle in neighboring countries. However, the bordering countries do not agree with this. Pakistan and Turkey have strengthened security around the borders to block any refugees. Airbnb is offering free stays for Afghan refugees all around the world, and the international community will give up over $900 million for the cause, but these resources are simply not enough for the forever increasing number of refugees. How does our country view the situation? Not surprisingly, most people have taken a negative stance. A national petition opposing taking in refugees has gathered over 20,000 signatures. South Korea itself is not perfectly stable, and when problems such as low birth rates, aging, teenage employment, and the rich-poor gap have not been solved, It is the general opinion that taking in more people is only reckless. Moreover, some say that there will be cultural clashes and even threats of terror. Hence, Korea has decided for now to help 378 Afghans that worked with the Korean government in the past. Afghanistan's current condition under the Taliban is abject. Movements to oppress women's rights can already be detected, and refugees cannot go to neighboring countries, nor countries further away. The international community is already planning to agree with the Taliban regime, albeit pressuring it to go towards a democratic path. What will happen to the refugees then? How will Afghanistan fare under Taliban rule? What is your stance on the refugee situation? Thank you for listening. This was Shinsong Middle School UNESCO Club's video on Afghanistan.